Hi, everyone. Welcome to More Than Numbers Live, the show focused on turning data teams from support functions into engines of growth. I'm Ollie Hughes. I'm one of the co-founders of Count.co. We're a canvas-based BI tool. We're all about turning data teams from dashboard factories into their organization's problem solvers. Each week, I have the pleasure of interviewing a data industry leader looking to turn their data team into value engines. And this week, I'm so pleased to invite Thibaud Arbes Dupuy. Sorry, Thibaud, I've completely destroyed your name here, but you forgive me, I hope. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No,
I practice it, and I'm still got such a lazy
You almost made it, and then it kind of all fell away at the end.
So actually, let me introduce you properly, though. So Thibaud, you are the VP of Business Performance at Deezer. Deezer is one of those amazing streaming applications you may know. You have a €500 million turnover. Over that, it's an amazing data organization, as you can probably imagine. I can't imagine the data sets you have to play with. It must be amazing. Your background before that, you were actually in banking and M&A, so you've got a bit of an amazing breadth of career so far. And today we're going to talk about how you're using the data org at Deezer to drive business performance and become the problem solving of the organization, which is a really amazing topic for us, as you can imagine. So thank you very much for being here. So before we get going into the meat of this, I just want to give you a bit more of your background. So I've teed up before, you a bit of banking before that, and then obviously now running the data org at Deezer, though we'll talk about the name in a second. Maybe the first question to ask is a bit of a joke one. Like, what's been your favorite BI tool? What was the tool that you used other than Excel, which I know you probably use a lot in banking, that you really fell in love with, that really helped you get into data more?
Well, Excel is probably still my favorite tool. What tool? I mean, we use BigQuery. We use a bit of Tableau, but it's probably not my favorite. I mean, I prefer working with the numbers directly, I suppose. So, I haven't tried any others, but I find BigQuery pretty useful, pretty organized and easy to use.
That's great. I mean, that's the.
Well, I mean, unless you're talking about visualization only, that's probably not the right answer. But
no, that's good. We'll take. I think we're proving your financial credentials here, but I just want to see tables of numbers.
Yeah, I mean, basically.
Maybe I could ask you if you obviously have come from banking into technology, into data. Tell us about that transition. Like, what made you want to go that route? That is maybe not a typical route, but it's an interesting one.
No, it's not. Well, I mean, it wasn't like a plan. I'd been doing M&A for a while. I quite enjoyed it, but it was a lot of work. And then I was in Australia at the time, and I wanted to move to Paris. And then there was an opportunity to do kind of strategy M&A at a tech company. And so I joined then initially as a chief of staff to an exec. And that was really good to kind of get a broad overview. And it was a lot. I mean, I learned a lot because actually in M&A I was doing large cap oil and gas, mining, so very different kind of industries. And it was, partly, honestly, it was like a lifestyle thing. And then was in tech doing kind of, as I said, more strategy, business development, M&A. And then it just kind of so happened there was a reorg. The opportunity came up to take over this, somewhat unloved product analytics team. And so, and there was a need for a kind of, from a new CEO, there was a need for someone to push like a cultural change to make the business a bit more data driven. And so I took the opportunity, but it wasn't part of a plan or anything. When I joined, I was running around like no idea what was going on. Had to restructure the team, had to recruit, had to retrain, had to change the relationship that we have with our stakeholders. And I had no idea what I was doing. So, it was quite fun and busy for a while. And then things started to kind of fit into place. I think a lot of the things that I brought to, I went from managing like one person to managing 20 overnight. And I brought, I suppose, the experience that I had from banking and from professional services generally into the team, meaning the way that I recruited, what I was looking for, the way I structured the team, the way we worked with stakeholders, and also the way that I promoted. And it actually, well, I think it seemed to work. I mean, we've got good retention. Things have kind of fallen into place. The team's just only gotten bigger. Our scope has gotten bigger. My scope's gotten bigger. And I think we've done pretty well.
I think you know what I find the story about how you got into data and how you got here. You stumbling is often a verb I hear. Like, I didn't really start. My plan wasn't to be here, but I've just ended up here anyway, and it's great. And it's just like basically people who love problem solving just end up their way to this position.
I think if you like strategy, but you actually want to be kind of closer to the action, it's a really good place to be, because you work with all the teams, and there's you can kind of, I mean, I broadly think of strategy two ways. It's like corporate strategy, which is, maybe a longer term plan. It might involve M&A, it might involve new markets and things like that. But then there's operational strategy, which is a much more immediate, and depending on the business, depending on where you are in your cycle, it can be a lot more effective, and depending on your industry.
Yeah.
And data, I think running a data team that's centralized and working across the business is probably the best position, maybe not the best, but one of the best positions, I think, to be in if you want to drive operational change and if you want to understand the operations of the business and how that drives value, I mean, down through the whole P&L.
I think, so we're going to come on to this, because this is why I want desperate to speak to you for so long, because I'm not the excitement you described there, that the potential, the impact for scope that you have, what you just laid out there. I don't think many data teams feel that. I don't think many data teams feel that they have that scope of change, that breadth is a positive. So I want to dig into that more. We'll come on to that in a second. But first, let's just orientate, give people a bit of a sense of Deezer and like just a bit of the stack. We call the segment tell us your stack. So just give us a sense. So Deezer, I think, we obviously streaming app is there. How can you help us orientate the audience to what it is that your world looks like a bit like now at a high level?
Well, we use GCP and then BigQuery, as I mentioned, and then visualization, we're using mostly Tableau. I would say 90% Tableau, 10% Looker.
The double whammy, as I call it.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically the way I explained it to an exec the other day is we use Tableau and then we build Looker tables for people who refuse to use Tableau. And then we actually still do reports in Google Sheets. Actually more and more, but really for, I'd say, exec level reporting. But it's just kind of a bit quicker for them to get to. It's, you leave the tab open and it's refreshing every week, and you get the real key business numbers. And we find that people kind of are better at following that than they are with Tableau, even if you get the email report. So, we kind of do whatever's necessary to be effective with the audience. But yeah, in terms of when we're doing analysis and when we want to use it ourselves, then I think Tableau is the main tool that we use.
That's great. And so the thing I want to start off, because I want to get into the way that you work, the way that your team is positioned, as the organization's problem solvers. I almost would consider, I think you've described it to me in the past as the internal consultancy. And I think that's an aspiration that most people have. They want to be that high octane. They want to be that close. And one of the things that is already different just you can see from your title is that you're the VP of business performance, right? You're not a head of data, despite the org being full of data engineers, analytics engineers, data scientists, and analysts. The structure, but your title is different. Tell us, maybe to start off, as we dig into more how you work, just explain that team name, where that comes from.
So it's evolved a bit over time, but we've now got a kind of clear distinction between, what we say internally, but it's a bit loose, I guess, is the more technical teams and the more business focused teams. And so we have a VP of engineering who's got a bunch of engineering teams under them who are all, including data engineers. We have an innovation team that has a bunch of machine learning engineers and data scientists. The difference is, so that's like an org difference. So we're under the chief revenue officer. So already like that positioning kind of sets the tone. How did it evolve like that? I mean, I obviously came in not being technical at all, and I'm still not particularly. So I came in, and that's the reason I took the job, was because I wanted to make operational change to improve the business. I'd been a stakeholder of the previous team as chief of staff, working on strategy and stuff, and I had kind of noticed a lot of, let's say, problems, or maybe not problems, or things that could have been better, or things that I would have done differently. Let's maybe put it that way. And then as kind of a lot came from the changes at the top as well. Like, our CEO has changed a few times, and I think we've generally become more and more data focused at that level as well. And that's just because I think CEOs people running tech companies now, particularly at scale up level, are genuinely coming in. Let's say they've had experience at another one, or maybe at Amazon, or a big tech company, or whatever their background is. They're usually, I think, more and more data focused, and so you kind of got to go with them, and that's a good thing. And data focused, it's like a bit of a buzzword. It really just means like be logical, quantitative, and use deductive reasoning to make decisions in the company. And it's a bit meaningless to say data focused. But so that was kind of the idea from the start. But it took time, because you've got to like build trust with stakeholders who have been running their business a certain way. You might want to change the way they run their business, and that's like a constant battle. And
it's a constant journey.
That kind of you build that trust. But if there's like a change in personnel in that team, you might have to go through that again. And so that's kind of a constant thing, and you need to balance that. But I think when you get results, when you can show stakeholders that you bring value, that they meet their objectives because of your help, then you start to build that trust. But I wouldn't say that we're like necessarily perfect at it, but it's gone pretty well.
I think you wouldn't be doing a job if you thought you were perfect, to be honest with you. That's kind of part of the game. This is great. Let's bring this in a bit more, because people will be really intrigued to hear this. I mean, one of the things that you just said, which I think is totally a huge part of this, is the way that you work is so different that when a new team leader comes in who you're working with has to relearn the way to work with you. Because one of my beefs in general is that data teams, the function of a data team is it has so much more breadth than, say, across the industry, across technology, or any organization. Like, whereas finance or product or marketing have well-defined responsibilities, in data it can be so varied. And so you get someone coming in and they think they should work with you like they used to work with their old data team in their old organization, and you've got to re-explain it. So that re-education piece is probably quite a helpful insight in itself. Just people thinking about they have to constantly remind people of the data team's role, because there is a looser definition in the industry as a whole. But let's come back to this. I want to share off the tenant slide. I know we spoke about the tenants about a year ago, and this is what made me so desperate to get you on the show, because this is what you helped form these tenants and helped us think of this through. The tenants are fourfold. So there's operational clarity, seeking to give the business sense, make business feel simple, make the business feel structured, not just throw out numbers, solving business problems, minimizing time to decision, and measuring yourself. And I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about, I guess, is about how your team works to these four, but particularly as pioneering as the problem-solving function, right? So can you just talk us through, maybe at a high level, like how it is that your teams works, thinks, and how they engage with the business? Like, how have you made that change when you start, now, and how they operate?
I think that the four tenants very closely align with the way we try to work with our teams. I think the way I have like a slide somewhere, that I pull out when I need to kind of introduce the team to somebody, and it essentially aligns with that. I think we say define objectives, define initiatives, iterate, and then achieve objectives. But I mean, really what that and that really aligns with the tenants. They're off the screen now, so I'm trying to remember what they are. But that kind of, I've got them written somewhere. So the seeking operational clarity is, they're back. Thank you. So seeking operational clarity is probably, it sounds like the one that, you wouldn't need to work on. It's like, well, we know what we need to do. We want to make more money or whatever. Or, I know what I'm doing at work. It's actually probably like it's the most important one, I think.
I agree.
At least in my experience, and it probably depends a bit on your business as well, but at least in my experience, it's the most important one. And you'd be amazed at how quickly you can start, you realize you yourself or other people are working on things that actually are not that relevant. And, there's always conversations about OKRs and whatever. And there's one thing to define them, but there's another to really stay focused. So for us, I always say like focus. That's like the word I use the most is focus. And you can really help in a data team or, at this point, data / FP&A, whatever, something who's quantitative and related to performance. You can help because you want to pull out the key drivers that are also actionable, and then you want to track how you're going on those. And that is kind of, you can see that little diagram there, and actually the way you present it to people. So whether it's in a tree diagram or whether it's whatever, but can actually make an impact. And it seems silly, but it's a really big deal.
I think people completely underestimate the power of clarity. Like if you think about the executive team at any business, they are swamped with information from every side at every level of detail. And if the data teams,
there's like a number of things going on. I mean, I think the executive one, I think people assume that their boss is like a kind of god and knows so much more than them because it's their boss. And it's just not the case at all. Like they know, if anything, less than their juniors. And so people are like, oh, this, and this, and this. And then the boss is like, oh, yeah, okay. And they assume the focus will always come down from the top, and it should, but you need to really guide that process as well, or help anyway.
100%. Exactly. You've got to make
that. I mean, that can start really at even the very junior level. The way you're presenting feedback to somebody. If you yourself haven't understood what the focus is on, you'll be presenting all sorts of stuff and you'll waste time working on various things. And you can't always expect the stakeholders to come to your team, the data team, let's say, to give you the focus. I think you definitely need to help. I mean, that happens all the time, and there'll be natural conflicts. Like, a marketing team will say, I want to, they'll often are wanting a lot of reach, for example. And that's not necessarily going to be the best ROI or whatever it might be. I mean, those things can happen regularly.
So that makes sense. So then, like, a part of the function of your team is to keep
bring that focus.
Yeah,
bring that focus. Yeah,
make sure you work on the problems that are going to drive the most revenue, the most impact. That you, as a data team, you have the responsibility to make sure that you know what those things are. You're not just being told by people who never got.
And to me, that's at a junior level when you're dealing directly with your stakeholders. At my level, it's also, should we be investing more in acquisition or, getting more PMs to work on churn reduction, whatever it might be. It's those trade-offs should we build a new feature or should we focus on quality of service or, whatever it might be. I mean, there's heaps of different things it could be, but once you decide, you keep people focused on that, and you also say, "Hey, this is how we're going to measure it."
And then let's talk about problem solving, because one of the things which I think is really interesting is that I think one of the ways you've worked is that the way your team works, that you are seen as like the place to go to get a problem solved. That you're there to think through problems. Like, how has that materialized? What is it that makes your team so good at that compared to other parts of the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the problem at hand. But if it's a problem that people think can be solved quantitatively, then yes, it will come to us. And sometimes we have to come in and say, look, we see that, there's some inefficiency here. Let us help and get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
I think that we've gotten the trust. I mean, maybe not everybody trusts us, but for those who do, the majority of the company, I'd say, it's probably just from helping them in the past. So I think you probably have to start by kind of muscling in, doing a good job, and then they'll come back. But you've got to be wary as well, because they start coming back for things that you don't want to be doing. You start to kind of you don't want them to just start outsourcing all their work to you. That can happen as well.
But that's helpful, because there's a virtuous cycle there, right? If you do a good job and you help them meaningfully, they will want more help, and that's kind of the key thing.
I mean, I think it's also org specific. If your C levels of, for example, let's say there's a problem in a performance marketing team where like a channel's underperforming or something, or they like just want to know can we better optimize our investments. If the CMO is like, oh, go speak to these guys, then they will. But if they're not, then you kind of need to say, oh, look, I've seen the results. I think we can do better. Let's sit together and work on it. And it flows out of that focus. So if you've said, this is your objective, this is what you need to improve this quarter, this half, this year, then, you need to draw up, the business owner needs to draw up a list of initiatives, and you want to work with them on that. And they'll want to work with you on it as well, because they need to meet their objectives. So I think the problem solving flows out of the focus, and then, try and be helpful. And that's how you win people's trust, I suppose.
And then, tell me, so obviously this has been a journey for you to get to this kind of level of impact where you describe yourself, like you are looked at to help with focus. You're looked at to help, like the C-suite is looking to the team to lean in and make help a team that move a lever. What are the skills that you now as a team have that perhaps weren't there to start with, or you now look for when you bring in someone who hasn't been working this way before? Like, what's the skill sets that when you see someone in an interview, you go like, you haven't, you're a data analyst, but you've got the skills that we actually think works well in this team?
I mean, we're kind of particular, I'd say, at least compared to our peers in Paris, and from what I can tell. I mean, I don't know exactly, but we pretty much only hire out of university if we can. It's something that I actually had lots of arguments with the exec.
I'm sure.
With my exec.
That doesn't sound like it's.
My exec was always like, the CRO was always, we need some more senior people. And I was like, no, patience.
Oh, sorry. So you mean like you hire very junior people from the back?
We only hire the junior. So you essentially have a cycle of someone leaves at the top, everyone moves up, and then you hire at the bottom.
Okay. So you actually believe in sort of you've actually come to realize you want to train up from a very early age in career rather than have bad habits built in up too late.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a bunch of reasons. There's practical reasons to that. It's much cheaper to get someone who, like, the top 1% is this is just getting into kind of recruitment now, but the salary difference between the best graduate and the worst graduate is much smaller than the salary difference between the best head of and the small head of and the worst head of in a market. So if you're really fighting over talent, you want to fight early if you don't have the biggest budget in town. But it also means you can train people to work the way that you want, and it also means people know that they're going to get promoted because they know that you work that way. So when we're looking at junior people who are, I mean, I think the number one thing we look at, we have like quite a few rounds and different people. You need like to pass a technical test. So I don't think it's that difficult, but we do kind of case studies that sees how quick you are at maths, how quick you are at kind of business concepts, pricing, changes in margin, things like that make you think. Sometimes we'd say, how would you run an A/B test on a product? But this is kind of pen and paper sort of case studies.
Okay.
And it's looking for, I mean, I'd say in my experience, the people who are the best at the numbers, following through, what we're saying, and then doing their little sums and going, they've been the best once they're in. And it doesn't matter if they're from in France, you've got a kind of split between engineering schools and business schools, and they're sort of culturally different. It doesn't really matter which one they're from. I've found that both can be really good.
It sounds like it's about the ability to think, the ability to problem solve, to be logical, to sort of to just be
there's always like a cultural aspect as well, like for every team and any one, obviously, but for the skills that we look for, it's nothing special. It's kind of ability to think. I mean, you might call it intelligence, but it's not exactly that. whatever it is. Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, ultimately, great talent is going to lead to great results. That's that's obviously a very important part of it. And then maybe get that feedback loop. I'm conscious of time. We've got so much to talk about. One of the things that I wanted to get to was a question that someone from the community gave me to ask you this, as we talked about how to become more the problem-solving function. And I think it's just really appropriate. Is they said, I buy into data analysts being the organization's problem solvers, but what's the single best first step that our team could take to stop being seen as a dashboard factory? Have you got anything? You've obviously been on that journey. It's not come quickly. I think that's one of the things you've already said. But like, what would be the single best step that you could imagine that you took, or that you took early on, that you think others could apply if they're already in a kind of more of a support function mode of operation?
I'd probably concentrate on the team and the team's skills and the culture of the team. So I think what I focused on first, and it was, because I'd moved from a non-data, very business-focused role, I've kind of brought that to the team. And I think that's the first step. So understand the P&L of your business as better than anybody in the company. Then, which you might be like, why would I do that on the data round? Let's just do it. Then understand how each team impacts the P&L. And then I think when you're then having conversations with them about their business, you're bringing that in the background. And that's going to kind of be the first step, I think.
That's great. So you've
Does
got to
that
make
make
sure
sense? I don't know.
Yeah, no, you basically, I think if I just tease out more, you're saying, it's great advice. You're saying, if you know the business well, you can have impact, you can have credibility, you can actually start to
I think
work.
it's just because you'll change yourself. So the way you're having that conversation is going to change. Instead of being like, yeah, I can build that dashboard for you, be like, yeah, I can build that dashboard for you, but what about this? How are you impacting this? Do you need to do this? Because you understand how they impact the business, and you want to bring that 360 degree or whatever view.
Yeah,
because you're working with all the stakeholders,
and you're coming to the table with an opinion. You're not just saying, "What do you want me to do?" You're saying,
"Yeah, have an opinion."
And here's my opinion on this. I'm not just here to press keys. I actually have an opinion about this business. I understand how this business works too, and therefore I think we should look at it this way. And at least then you're starting to problem solve with them. You're giving them alternative viewpoint.
Yeah. I mean, an example. If you go back to the 4 tenets, I mean, this doesn't happen all the time, but I'm sure everyone's had this experience with like a PM that wants to build a new feature because it's really cool and fun, but will have absolutely no impact on the business. And you might be like, that's cool, but we see from XYZ it's not going to increase retention, or it's not going to increase engagement. Engagement's correlated to retention, which is obviously lifetime value, which is where we get our revenue from. So why don't we focus on something else? Like, this is probably a better thing to focus on. Or, I don't know, it's a made up example, but something like that. And then so you're bringing that idea. So I think the first step would be to know it yourself. So, and then it'll come naturally, I'd say.
That makes total sense. You're coming in with an opinion. You are the mental step. I think what you're describing is, I'm going to understand this business myself. I'm going to have an opinion about how it works and how to solve problems.
What's driving revenue? What drives costs?
Exactly. And as you go, as you get more knowledge, as you solve problems, you retain that knowledge, you go back into the business, you have more evidence and more data-led evidence to help you be better at that task and be even more useful. Yeah, that's really great advice.
Definitely.
That's awesome. Thibaud, we've almost at the end. I'm so grateful for your time today. If you want to find out more from Thibaud, you can find him through our show notes. You can go to count.co/NTN, where you can find other episodes as well we've had in this series. Thibaud, I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come speak to us and tell us about this transformation. We've learned about what it means to go to business performance rather than just data. We've learned about problem solving, recruitment. We've covered lots of different areas. I'm grateful to you for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope it's been useful.
It's been great.